Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're looking at Terraforming Mars. Now it's a game by Stronghold Games and FryX Games for 1 to 5 players. The game lasts from 90 minutes to 120 minutes. However, in practicality, it lasts a bit longer, especially if you have more players. The aim of the game is to garner as many victory points as you can before the terraformation of Mars is complete or before the generational timer is finished. And before you ask, no, there's no sign of Matt Damon in this game. I have the board here laid out, so let's have a look at what we get. You play as a corporate entity. Now for your very first game, you play as a beginning corporation where you have a lot of money and a lot of cards. However, in subsequent games, once you get the hang of it, you play as differing types of corporations. Some have extra money, some have a higher card deck, and some have increased resources. Now there's 12 corporations in total, so there's a nice variety and replayability to this game. The game depends largely on a card draft mechanic, combined with a small degree of tile laying mechanics, where the player combines resource management to increase both their income and the development of the planet of Mars itself. So let's look at the board. As you can see, the outlay of Mars is quite clear, where there are places where you can develop cities, greenery, or oceans. Now, depending on where you develop, you can collect various resources, such as plant life, or steel, or even in some cases, draw new cards. The blue-grey hexagons are places where you can only develop oceans. One of the winning conditions of the game is for your city to be surrounded by greenery. Per piece of greenery that surrounds your city, you get an extra victory point. However, this can be intruded upon by other players, who in some cases will either build a piece of greenery of their own, or, if they're very cheeky, actually steal your spot with their own city and take the victory points for themselves. Now here along the outside of the board is the Terraforming Score, which doubles up for two things. One, it shows you how much income you get every turn. So, for example, here, this player gets 32 mega credits every turn. But it also doubles up as victory points. So obviously, the further along the terraforming score, the better it is for you as a player. This gauge here is your temperature. Now, as the game progresses, the temperature will go up. And as the temperature goes up, it allows for certain cards to be played, such as, say, the development of infrastructure or to have animals on the planet. This gauge here is oxygen, which does largely the same thing. The more oxygen there is, the more variety and abilities you will have in terms of playing your cards. And finally, you have the ocean tiles. Now, there's 9 of them. And they can only go on the light blue-grey squares. And when all the ocean tiles are down, combined with maximum oxygen and maximum temperature, the game is over. Mars has been terraformed, and players tally up their victory points to see who has won. These are the player sheets, where you will be spending the bulk of the game working. Now this symbol represents mega credits, which is the game's currency. Steel, which is a resource that allows you to build and play cards. Titanium, which is another resource that allows you to build and play more advanced cards. Plant life, which allows you to develop forests. Energy, which is a resource you spend on development, and all unused energy at the end of a turn or the end of a generation then contributes to heat, which in turn is used to increase the temperature on Mars. Now you keep track of all your stats with 3 simple coloured and different sized cubes. Copper, which is worth 1, silver, which is worth 5, and gold, which is worth 10. And all other parts of the board are marked with distinct player cubes, which help keep track of whose territory belongs to who. The game takes place over a series of phases called generations. And every generation, players draw up to 4 cards. Now, of the 4 cards that they draw, they have to pay up to 3 mega credits for every card that they decide to keep. Any cards that they don't pay to keep are then discarded. The player then has 1 to 2 actions per turn. So they can decide to play one card or take one action, or they can decide to take two actions or play two cards. They continue to do this until they either have no more actions to take or no more cards to play, or they effectively decide to pass on their turn. Once a player passes their turn, they can no longer play any cards that generation or take any actions that generation, and play continues without them until the final person in play passes. Then the generation is over, all resources are replenished, 4 more cards are dealt to all players, and the game continues on again with a new generation. Once the game reaches the 20th generation, the game is over, regardless of whether Mars has been terraformed or not. There are 3 distinct cards: red cards, green cards, and blue cards. Event cards, automated cards, and active cards. Now, event cards are one-time only effect cards that are discarded once they've been played. Automated cards are cards that have one effect only, but also contribute to your operations, either with resources, such as you can see here in the top right, or victory points, as you can see here in the bottom right. And finally, active cards, which have a constant effect or a power that you're allowed to exercise once per generation. Now here in the corner, you can see the cost it takes to play the card. And more importantly, here on the bottom, you can see how you increase or decrease your resources management. For example, this card, once played, reduces your plant production by 1, but increases your income by 4. And finally, we have cards which can have a negative effect on other players, such as this one. The red outline on the symbol means that another player is deprived of that resource. So if I played this card, another player would lose 2 plant resources, while at the same time I gain 2 steel resources. These cards all have various effects, which are quite frankly too numerous to mention, as there are 208 of them. However, to the credit of the game designers, every card has its function written down clearly and distinctly at the bottom of every card. So even if you are playing it for the very first time, you know exactly what it does. All these effects give you a very unique playing and strategic experience every single time you play the game. And so the game as a result is deceptively simple to learn and yet incredibly complex to play. Every single person I have played this game with has been addicted within the first 5 minutes, as the cards allow an incredible variance of strategy depending on your play style, card draw, and what corporation ethic you were playing with. This is further enhanced with the addition of a milestone and awards section on the board, which gives players incentive to develop their playstyle in a certain direction to garner 5 solid victory points. It serves as a good motivator to keep an eye on your fellow players' progress, and it instills a good competitive aspect that would otherwise be lacking in this game. Of the 3 people I've played this game with, 2 of the 3 people adored it. They gave it a solid 10 out of 10. They were hooked. The third person gave it a 9 out of 10. And they honestly couldn't wait to play it again either. As for myself, I would give it a 9 out of 10 type of thing as well. I would be in that camp, as the game is thematically brilliant. If you put a good soundtrack on in the background as you play, like Mass Effect or Stellaris, the experience is very immersive and very enthralling. However, this is tempered slightly by some of the components. The player sheet itself is very thin and very easy to move, and on several occasions through every game I've played, these sheets were knocked with elbows, knocked with someone banging their knee off the table, or even the odd cat invasion, which scatters the pieces literally everywhere, forcing you to recollect from memory what your level of income was in terms of your credits, your steel, your heat, or your energy. This is made worse by the size of the particular board itself being too small for my tastes. If you have the full amount of players, space can be at a premium, as every player has player sheets. They have cards which accumulate over the 20 generations of the game. And you have people during their turns reaching up to place a tile, or, at the end of a generation, reaching up to replenish all their resources, which can lead to accidents, sheets being knocked, components being scattered, which is problematic. To me, this would have been solved slightly if the board itself, instead of being square, was rectangular. The Firefly game is a game that's a nice, long, rectangular board, accommodates a lot of cards and a lot of players, but this isn't an issue on that because the rectangular board gives more playing space and more access for people to reach. This being a square board cuts off a fifth player, either forcing them into a corner or forcing two players to share one side of the board, and things, as a result, get messy. Now, I appreciate that there's an awful lot in this game. For the price you pay, you get a lot of cards, you get a lot of mechanics, and you get a game that plays a different way so many different times. However, it is let down by some of the flimsiness of the components. The player sheets, quite frankly, are terrible. They barely do the job. The board itself, it's only a personal gripe, but it's just that bit too small. If you have a fifth player, you're squashing them in. As for the solo play, it's interesting, but you're losing some of the parts of the 2-player to 5-player competitive game. For example, you don't get to play with the milestones or the awards section of the game. Cards that give you victory points are pretty much useless. Now, unless you're a player that tries to beat their own high score every time, there's not much point in playing them. And the generational counter goes from 20 to 14, so it's more a race of terraforming Mars than garnering high victory points. That said, I'm biased in this aspect because I've always been a social gamer as opposed to a solitary one. So if you're a solo player and this seems very compelling to you and you're happy to try and constantly beat your own high score, then by all means, I thoroughly recommend it. It is a game I think is going to be up there on my shelf for a very long time. It is great fun to play and I cannot recommend it enough. Now until next time, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you liked the video, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff because it helps keep the channel alive. And until next time, this is Sean. Good luck and God bless.